Hi everybody, this is the second in a series of tutorials for assignment M2A3 using AutoCAD files to model the healing garden, which we previously drafted up in AutoCAD. So we're at the point now where you've brought in the basic geometry. We've got this 2D version up here that we've already gone through and made faces, cleaned things up so everything's working. This is also assumed that you've already draped this, in which case, again, just quick review, you triple click, select all that, choose the drape tool over here, which is one of the sandbox tools built into SketchUp, move over the terrain, click, and it will take all these lines and project them down onto the terrain model. Now, when you first do that, it may not look like it did anything. One way to help see that is if you have the styles panel up, excuse me, if you have the styles panel up, right now we're displaying shaded with textures. If we go to just shaded, now we can zoom in here and see that we have indeed broken this up into those different areas. Of course, I've already gone through and found these little problems. There are some near the steps, one down here, one over here, maybe some near the circle here, but I've cleaned those up already so that when I click on any of these pieces, even between the curb, ooh, that's not good. All right, so there's an issue there, and I just found it over here. So let's fix that. That's part of this process that we go through. This is an interesting one because it's kind of on a curve here. I'm just going to delete these pieces and use the line tool. I can simulate, oopsies, missed that, right on the end. Going to parallel, actually one there. This is when the inferences are trying to make it do something I don't want it to do. All right, move around a little bit. Okay, there. And actually, even while I'm drawing, I don't like that little piece, so I'm going to right click on it, erase it, and snap right to the corner. That should do it there. And now I have another one here, which looks like just a straight piece I need to add in. There we go. So let's turn our hidden geometry off. So as I was saying, even when you click between the curbs, you just get that area. Now we're ready to start applying textures. And this is where we actually use a combination of the 2D version that we've already created, which I'll start with, talk a little bit about textures, going to jump over into Photoshop, show you how to create some of the textures there. I actually added a couple other lines in here. I think originally this whole area selects, but this is the area under the water fountain, and it's a bunch of river gravel, river stone. This is ground cover in these areas. So if you want to add that in there, you can just draw those lines in there. Show the hidden geometry, cross from one hidden line to the next hidden line to create those, and then turn the hidden geometry back off. You'll also notice that this area here has to have ground cover here, lawn here, and I don't have the veins in yet. So after I go through a little bit on the materials, I'll come back here and show you how to break this up using the wall, just to intersect faces with selection. And then because this doesn't really connect, we'll have to add another line in here. And then when we bring the veins in, they should connect up to that area too. So I'll make sure I go through that as well. And then after we go through the ground materials, I will take a look at the building. And there's a couple techniques. We talked about bringing images into SketchUp using a floating pin method to really kind of connect it right to the surface, or starting in Photoshop and using the perspective crop tool to take the original image and take the perspective out of it. Then we'll use the fixed pin method to attach it to the building and stretch it from there. Okay, so that's kind of where we're going to go from here. And let's start by just taking a look at materials. One of the things I've provided for you is a couple textures that I created based on photographs of the actual site. So here's a photograph of some of the paving material. This is where you can use the perspective crop tool. It's right below the magic wand. The crop tool may be showing, but if you click and hold, you'll see the perspective crop tool. This used to just be an option in the options bar, but now they've made it a distinct standalone tool. What I'm looking for is a basic pattern in here. So I'm going to start back here. Click, and the first one you just kind of get this line. Click. Now I start getting a mesh. So I'm going to come up to this third corner right on the joint line there, click, and then up back to here. So this lines up because I'm actually hitting all the modules on there. Let's see what it does when I click OK. So that gives me a single module, even have a little leaf there on it. That looks pretty good. So I can take that, go to File, Export as, or Quick Export as PNG or JPEG. Either one. PNG is probably a better choice, gives you higher quality images, less lost in the compression. But I'm not going to do that since I already have this saved. I just want you to show you how we created that image. If you didn't have a photograph, you could just find something that's similar online and use it as a texture. Now, I'm not going to start on the terrain model because anything that's placed on here in order to get to line up has to be a projected texture. And I can't adjust the position or scaling or rotation of a projected texture. That's just the nature of how it works, which means what I want to do is come up here, get this adjusted and oriented properly on all these, then convert them into projected textures. And probably the smartest way to do it, I didn't do it in class today this way because of the way I was sequencing the demonstration, but it would be better to apply this and rotate and get these on all these different surfaces, then turn them into projected textures and project them down onto the surface. And I'll show you how to do that. So let's start with the paving, the paving on the kind of main plaza area there. In order to set that up, I am going to go to the materials. And instead of selecting one, I'm going to click on this icon right here that says Create Material. I will call that Plaza Paving. I can spell. Okay, Plaza Paving. Now I can set this as a color, but I am going to use a texture map, which will open a dialog box. I'm going to go to my folder, Photos, Images, and there we go. There's that paving PNG that I'd created earlier, which with the process I just showed you. Now I'm just going to leave it at the default setting. It's 1 foot by 6, and that seems a little 6 7/16 inches. Seems a little small. Probably that's more like, I don't know, 4 feet. I don't really know, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to do that, apply it, and zoom in. So now I can see, relatively speaking, it still looks a little small. The pavers are bigger than that. So to fix that, I right-click, choose Texture and Position. Remember, there's our little friend, the green push pin here, and if I pull that out, keep it parallel, and I usually just push the wheel button down and rotate. Now that looks a little bit better. Might be a tad large, but I like it. So once I've got it scaled the way I want it, right-click, done. Now I can pick up that texture and I can use that for here and for here, right? Because this is all oriented exactly the same way. This up, hold the Alt key down, click, and I can see that it doesn't quite match in terms of the rotation, but now that I've applied it to the surface, I can choose Texture, Position, and just rotate it around until you see it kind of snap into that. Now I've got kind of a little edge here, so I'm going to move that over. That looks a little better, right? Okay, maybe I'll move it down here too. Just trying to make it look as good as I can within that area. So just position it so it looks right. Once you're done, right-click, done, and that's finished. So I'm not doing anything else right now. Come down here, click on this one, same thing, right-click, Texture, Position, not quite there. All right, sometimes you may have to there we go. That's a little better. I have to move that pin out because it kind of snaps to the edge. I'm just lining this over to line it up over here. Done. That looks pretty good. Last but not least, this one, same thing. Right click, Texture, Position. move this out here. Sometimes it is a little hard to see. Just trying to line up these lines and then click on this and say, yeah, that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll move it over a bit. All right, good enough, done. So I've got those areas set up right now, and each of them is the correct orientation. Really important that you do that up here on the 2D version, because once you put it down on the terrain model as a projected texture, you can't change the position, scale it, do anything. So it has to be the right scale, the right orientation. If you do that first, everything's good to go. The next step is just to click on each of these, texture, projected, click on this, texture, projected, texture, projected, and this one, the other unique one, texture, projected. Once that's done, I can grab my paint bucket, Alt click to pick that up, paint it on there, Alt click, pick that up, paint it there, there, and there. Alt click, pick that one up. And finally, Alt click, pick that one up. And I'm starting to get my colors. The other areas on here, this particular image isn't perfectly color coded. This is kind of ground cover in here. This is also ground cover. So is this. So is this. This is lawn. Ground cover here. Lawn, lawn, lawn. And I need those veins in there too, right? But I'll start by filling in the basic colors. Then we'll bring the veins in to break that up into subspaces. So let's take a look at some of the basic SketchUp textures. This was a unique one based on the actual paving that's out there, but this is just plain concrete, so I don't really need something really fancy. However, I'm still going to use the same process. I'm going to go over to my materials panel, and I will look for, well, let's look asphalt and concrete. That's polished concrete, old, just basically a light tone. So I will put that on here, and you can see I've got a little bit of a pattern going through there, so maybe I'll do texture position. Just make that a little bit bigger. Done. Right click. Once again, make it projected. Pick it up. Put it back down, and now it's pasted onto there. And I think just because this is new paving compared to what's out here, the original paving that's out there was old, it's older, I'm just going to use colors. We go down and find some nice, very light, white smoke is good, it's kind of a light gray. And then maybe slightly darker than that on the paved surfaces, just so you can tell the difference between them. And that way it allows us to see what's new paving, what's existing paving. Now I've got this, I can pick that up. Actually, this one, if you see this line in here, I might have put that in there originally. I'm just going to switch to my eraser, hold the control key down, and just smooth that off because I really want that to be all one surface. There we go. If I wanted to also to make this a little different, I could go back to my white smoke and just fill that in there. And later on, I will I missed that one there. So let's fix this too. This is a spot, it filled that in, it should have, so I just noticed there's some thick lines in here. Again, 2 lines where there should be 1. Easy enough to correct. Now this is separate. So we'll just leave that the way it is until we go in and add the lawn texture. So let's find kind of a lawn texture to fill in on there. Once again, we are going to move back up here to create that. So let's go to materials, landscape, vegetation. There's a grass light green. Let's fill that in. I'm going to zoom in. Oh, that's not too bad, but I could change this to position, make it a little bigger. Right click, texture, projected. I don't have to do this everywhere, right? I just have to do it on one spot. So that's lawn and that's lawn. That's going to be lawn, but it's filling this in, right? So I have to fix that in a minute. And that's lawn in there, and that's lawn in there. Not really. Okay. Still got a problem, right? Thought this was fixed, but it isn't. But this is what happens. So let's switch back to our solid view. Let's get rid of this, and I can see the culprit right there. And geometry off. Boom, boom. Okay, good. So now, if we get my paint bucket, place it, we're good. So you run into those little anomalies, you just clean them up and fix them. Oh yeah, well, this is also lawn out front here, so let's go to the paint bucket, pick this up, we'll put that in, and that's lawn there too. Then let's come down here and switch to something with a little more texture, maybe something like that. Once again, I'm going to move up to the top, fill an area, go back to my texture rendering so I can see it. Kind of small there, so I'm going to do the same thing. Position, give it a little coarseness, turn it into a projected texture, pick it up, and there. Now on some of the photographs, what you'll notice is that these areas actually are mulch, just a lot of brown bark mulch, but I think the intent is to plant other plants in there, so we're going to fill them in with ground cover instead of mulch, just so it looks a little bit better. Oh, and this area, and this area, and that area, and that area. So those are all the planting beds where we're going to put those other plants that we'll bring in eventually as blocks. Right here, as I mentioned, that's gravel. There's crushed rock, so we can put that in there. So again, I can apply it directly, but that's it's a little fine for what I want, and I can't change it there. So let's move up. And what have I got here? Well, I don't have anything there because I added that to the other drawing. So let's just add it here. There we go. There we go. Let's go to texture, position, and move this out here a bit. There we go, made it a little bit bigger. Texture projected. Alt click on it. There we go, that looks a little bit better. So we've got all those areas picked up now. Let's see, what else do we have to work with? Well, we've got this area down here. Okay, so that's just going to be more of that. And again, I picked it up from there. It really should use the same projected texture, but it didn't. So I'll come back up here, come down here, and there we go. This, I'm just going to use a color. I think that's good enough for that. And you can see we're pretty much getting everything filled in there that we need. Now, if we want to change the curves, let's go back to colors. Make that a little bit darker, just so we can see it. There we go. All right, now the only issue we really have right now before we get to the building, and I'll bring in the veins in a little bit, is this area here, because as I said, this should be ground cover up here and this should be lawn. And that's not happening because this is still one area. Let's take this and this, right click and choose intersect faces with selection. Didn't help me much, right? Well, that's because, as I mentioned before, I can see that this doesn't go through all the way. And the easiest way to fix that, to be honest, is to take this line right here and unsoften it. I think now you can see that that and that are separate. So the lawn comes around here, but that's ground cover. Now I can take my paint bucket, select that, click on there, and that's totally separate from what's below there. That's exactly what I want. Now, it doesn't look right, does it? So let's move back up here. Sometimes SketchUp just doesn't. Let's undo it. Try it again. It is projected. So let's pick this color up, then pick this color up. Now it works. I don't know. I think there actually is a bug in SketchUp 2016 because I've never had this issue before with it. That seems to reset it. Just picking a different color and then coming back. As you can see, it kind of fixed that problem. All right. We've got that broken into a couple pieces, and later on we can adjust this landform. But for right now, we're in pretty good shape as far as all the colors and patterns on the ground plane go. Everything is looking like it's supposed to be. So let's focus our attention now on the building. We can come back and add the steps in. Well, let's look at one of those right now. I did have another material that I got from photographing some of the stones that were on the site. Let's go over to the materials panel again, choose new, call it just stone for steps. Texture image, so I'm going to click on the little folder icon here, navigate to where I save that. Photos, textures, and here's this stone too. Now this is a case where I don't really know how big to make it. I'm going to try that at 5 feet. And then I'm going to open this up, paint bucket, shift click on it, and just take a look. Well, actually that looks pretty good. If it was too small, you couldn't see the tone, so I'm pretty happy with that. And if you see these edges on your model, then use the eraser tool, hold the control key down, and just smooth them off, because we don't really want to see those. Okay, come around the other side, same thing. Control, eraser. If you don't hold the control key down, it will erase the lines and your steps will come apart. But as long as you hold the control key down, you're good to go. Okay, so that's pretty nice there. Looks like the stone fits in. We have to do a little adjustment here. That's something you can either try and adjust this up with Artisan with the move tool, or come back to here and just draw a new plane that goes from there to here that replaces what we have here. But in this case, we might be able to come in and kind of pull this up a little bit. But that's for another tutorial. Okay. Let's focus on the building now. Then we'll create the brick material, which can be applied to these walls and to some of the brick walls on the buildings. But it helps to be able to have some of the photographs on the building before we do that, because we need the brick color to match that. And even though it comes from the same photograph of the building, exposure is different. We need to do some adjustments to it. So the building. Let's look at the very first method to bring a photograph of a building in and map it onto the face. Instead of having to model the geometry, we can just use the photograph. It's good enough for the background. Oh, I just noticed too, there's a little spot here. I created an area to fill in here. This really should work, but it's not. So I need to go up here. There we go. That was a separate piece of geometry I created to fill in there. Now let's focus on the building. I'm going to open this group up and use the push-pull tool just to make that a little bit bigger. This is a method that if you know the height of the building or the structure that you have a photograph of, if you set this method works perfectly. If you don't know, which I can't, honestly, I don't remember from last year, and I didn't climb up in the building and measure it. I was kind of approximating it. But I can also look at the photograph and say, okay, proportionally this looks right, or it doesn't look right. I can align it and then measure the door in the building photo, and if the door is like 12 feet tall, I know it's too big. I need to make it shorter. So that's kind of trial and error method to make that work. I'll show you the other method with Photoshop, which actually, if you don't know the heights, but you know the footprint, the widths, it's a better method. But you should understand how to do this in SketchUp because it's actually a really helpful tool. I'm going to use the import command switch over to my image types. Back out of here, go to photos. And this is the garden entry JPEG right here. You can see that's a photograph of that facade. The door opens out onto the area there, and that's the one I want to import. And I think I did, whoops, that's not it. I didn't point this out, so let's check this again. You need to make sure you have this checked on uses texture. So let's try it again. Sometimes when you do it like this is flipping around the other side, if you come up here and just bring it across, it doesn't look right when it's previewing, but it's going to fit right. Now, I don't care how big it is. I don't care where it is. All I care about is that I can see all four corners of this facade that match the four corners of my geometry. To be able to reshape that, I need to right click, choose texture and position. But with these, I can't really, I can distort it and scale it and all that, but I can't really line it up. What I need to do is right click again, choose uncheck fixed pins, and now I get these four yellow push pins. And by clicking and letting go, I can put them in the position. And at this stage, I'm not worrying about being perfect. Then I can zoom in on it and say, okay, yeah, I didn't really hit the corner, did I? There we go, that's better. So you want the little pin portion right at the end. And I'm not dragging this pin. I'm clicking on it and then letting go and moving it. Dragging will come into play in a second. Once you've got all those aligned, then you're ready to start moving. So I click, hold the button down and drag that to that corner. Click and hold, snap it to that corner. Click and hold, snap it to that corner. Click and hold, snap it to that corner. Now if I hold the wheel in and rotate, you can see it's adjusted the perspective in that photograph so it maps like an elevation right on the side of that geometry, which is really cool way to put images on a building. I'm going to right click and choose done, and this is when I can look at this and judge it. I can grab my tape measure. These doors aren't like 6'8", that's 7'9". Still seems a little tall to me. I don't think they're quite that tall, and it looks a little vertical. If that's the case, let's get our push-pull tool, push this down a little bit, right click, texture, position. Now I still have these pins, so I can just drag them down, snap them to the new position of the corner, right click, say done. Now if I use my tape measure, that's 7'7". I believe that. They're taller than 6'8" doors. So there we have it. It fits right on there. It's close enough. We look at it from a distance. It still gives us the illusion that all that architectural detail is on there. Now if you wanted to, you could trace around. I didn't do this in class, but if you wanted to, you could trace around this. Okay, come on. Okay, this probably won't work since I haven't practiced this, but hopefully oh, that's why it's not working. I'm not inside the group. That would help. Okay, get inside the group. I'll start up here so you can see it. You can click right there, come across there, there, there. There. Okay, I probably should have tried that first. Should be on that facade. Let's do a little right select, set faces selection. All right, well, somehow I didn't snap to something. I think it looks like that one maybe. So I'm just going to get rid of that. But basically, if you can draw on this, probably I can give it another try later. But if you draw a surface on here, you could push it back. You could pull these brick, you can see that the brick actually sticks out a bit. This ledge sticks out a bit. So if you wanted to add that geometry in, you could use this image as a way to trace over it, add that in, and make it, push it out a little bit to create 3D. And I'm kind of frustrated that, okay, that's endpoint outside. Let's see if I can do this one. To here, to here. This really actually is kind of a helpful. Okay, none of that's connecting to that geometry. I don't know why. Let's switch back to this view. And let's do something else. I think this is the issue. I'm snapping to outside the group here. So this is a case where going to model info, saying hide everything else. Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. That's why it's not closing, because this box actually goes down beyond where I'm drawing, and I haven't closed it in. So if I go up to here and up to here, select everything, set faces selection. Okay, I shouldn't have gone down this road. Just forget about this. I don't know why this isn't lining up. Just give me another try. Okay, instead of starting in the middle, what I'm going to do in this case is start from the edge here, come out, draw up, over, down, over. Now you can see I'm getting all the perpendicular. Over to here, down to here. There we go. Helps if you start from the edge. Now I could use my push-pull tool and pull that out a bit. Just wanted to show you how this would work. So now if I close the group, you can see I have the photograph map, but I also have that little bit of geometry actually bumping out there, which is what happens in reality. So whether you do, you don't have to add that level of detail, but if you wanted to, you could, because you can see it in the picture, and it doesn't take a lot of time if you do it the right way and start from the edges and work your way in so all the surfaces connect. Then we've got those little edges we can deal with, and if we take a view from here, we can actually see some of the detail of the architecture. Okay, that's the first way to do it. That's what's called the floating pin method. You map the image on there, right-click, choose texture position. Once you get the position activated, you see the colored pins. You right-click again and choose uncheck fixed pins, which gives you floating pins. The second method to do that is to go back to Photoshop and say, well, I've got these building elevations. Let's start with this one that I want to map on there. But I don't want to have to use the floating pin method. So I'm going to use the same tool and grab the corners of this elevation. Once again, first time, don't worry about the position exactly. Once I have this, I'm going to zoom in. You can see this come down a little bit. Zoom out, zoom in. Get that lined up. It needs to come down maybe a little bit more. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And this one maybe just up a bit. There we go. Okay, so it's just created that facade once again. I can go to File, Export, export it out as a quick PNG, which I've already done. And let's try this again. Different method. One of the things when you pull this up, if there's sidewalks and other elements down here, or these, it gives you extra lines. You want to get rid of all those lines in the building when you do this because you want it to be one continuous facade. Unfortunately, over here, if you click on this line and get rid of it, it gets rid of the surface because there's apparently a little bend there. So on this side, I'll demonstrate it after I do this one. You need to place it, make it a little short, hide this line or smooth it, and then extend the texture across onto there, and it'll work okay. Actually, you can't smooth it, you just have to hide it. But let me show you the straightforward. If you have a single surface, one plane, 2D, we go through the same process, import. In this case, I have the left elevation cropped. It's already been adjusted like I just did. Put it in there and snap it to all the way out to the other edge, because we know that that width is correct. I don't know about the height, but the width is correct. I get my push-pull tool. Now I can pull this up until I get, now it's starting to repeat, so there's the top right there. And now I know exactly that's how high that building has to be. Now in this one, like I said, it's a little different. Let's do the same process. File, import. I've got the right side elevation cropped. I'm going to start right here. I'll snap to there. That's the entire image, but it actually needs to go to there. So I'm going to do texture position. I'm going to go back to my floating pins, and I'm going to bring in at about the same distance. Then I'm going to do position. Just going to move it over to there. Say done. Get my paint bucket. Alt click, click there. That's not working very well. Maybe I pulled it over a little too much. So let's make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And I'm just going to hide that line. It just extends it over. And once again, it looks like it lines up pretty well with the top of it there too. All right, click and close this. Now I've got the building facade already attached to that building, and the rest of this is kind of standard brick. So I'm going to create another texture over here. We'll call this building brick. Click on this, textures. There's my hospital brick. Now 135 feet seems a little big, so I'm going to be like maybe 3 feet. That still is a little big, right? I was just guessing, so I can open this up, this texture, right click, position. All right, I'm not sure why it's not letting me change this. Let's get that one, let's apply it to there. There we go. I think it's because I applied that outside of the group. So I got it, you want to go inside the group and apply it. Now I can position it. I can move in here and I can see that it's a little big, right? So if I shrink that down, that's pretty close. I'm lining these joints up right here, so now it's kind of close enough. So I'm going to do done. That lines up pretty well. It's kind of set back off of it, but it's also a little light. So I'm going to click on the Edit tab and just darken this down a bit. Deselect it. I can actually see what I'm doing a little bit better. Okay, that looks a little closer. And now when I look at this, you can play around with that and get it adjusted a little bit more, but it actually looks pretty close to the existing brick. Both of these photographs are taken with different lighting conditions, so it's not going to match exactly, but it gets us pretty close to the size and scale of that. And that's really the process before you go in and start adding plants is the next step really once you get those materials on there. So the next video I will talk about adding the plants. We'll talk about adjusting this area here with this retaining wall. Show you a little quick method to do that, which since this wall's here, it's really too high right now. I have to step it down. And this, if this slopes down all the way to the paving elevation, I don't really need this wall, right? So this should be up a little bit, and I'll show you how to fix that. as well as place the plants. And then we're going to use the joint push-pull tool to pull the driveway down to give us that 6-inch curve that we need. But I'll stop here for now, and we'll finish that up in the next tutorial.